Heyo everybody, Haku here with this week's read-through for Magical Girl Raising Project or Mahou Shoujo Ikusei Keikaku, JOKERS Chapter 4, and we are at the second part of it. I only had time to read the first 12 pages last time, so I'm just gonna split this into 3 parts because there really isn't a very great way to, there wasn't a better way to divide this other than to do it like this, I guess. So I'm gonna read today from pages 12 to 30, and then from 31 to 48 for the third part next week, because I could not find a better way to do this. There were a lot of really long scenes with no scene breaks, and I'm not going to end a video in the middle of a scene. So that's the reason it's kind of screwy, and I was super busy last week. So really messed me up there. But last time was really good. We kind of had our first deaths, and I'll try to recount where all the characters are really quick before I start, just to know that I am refreshed and know where all the characters are, kind of. But a lot of the characters, where they are, is a bit of a mystery. Okay, so we saw that Prism Cherry was dead. Same goes for Lady Proud. They are both, like, for real dead. So that's 2 down that are, like, for real dead. Then there's 3 missing, and the 3 missing ones were Umbrain, who may or may not be dead, Tempest, who may or may not be dead, and Kafuria, who may or may not be dead, or the killer. In addition to that, we have Marika Fukuroi, who stayed behind to take out all the demons right there, and also Grimheart has this tendency to disappear whenever there's an action scene, which makes me think she could be the killer as well. Because she disappears quite often. They didn't mention her at all during this scene. They didn't mention her at all during the scene in the desert either. And also I didn't mention Shufflin. Shufflin is dead, but I feel like there's going to be a whole deck of Shufflin, so I'm not as worried about Shufflin being dead here. And that would be a full 8. That would be half the cast. So for the remaining 8, where did everybody end up? So we saw that Snow White ended up at the end there with Filaru, Styler Mimi, and Deluge, and also one more. I think it was it Utakata? Did they all escape together? They may have, or I think Utakata may have been with Quake and Inferno. So that means I'd be missing another one in there somewhere, I guess. Who else would it be? Lady Proud and Umbrain is neither of those. It's none of the freelancers, is it? No, it's none of the freelancers. I mentioned all of them. Pure Elements, mentioned all of them. So yeah, I guess I got everybody. I mentioned Marika and Styler Mimi, so I guess I am at all 16, because I mentioned everybody. Oh yeah, Stunt Chica, that's who I forgot. Stunt Chica was with Snow White, so that must mean that Utakata was with Quake or Inferno. So they might be all in the same place, in Quake, Inferno, and Utakata escaped first because they weren't mentioned, or there could be a chance that one group went through the bulkhead one way, but Quake, Inferno, and Utakata went through the other bulkhead the other way, so those 3 might be separated off by themselves. But yeah, that's where everybody is. We're starting at the very end of page 12 with Princess Inferno, so let's get into it. Starting with Princess Inferno. It seems Deluge has escaped in the direction of the bulkhead along with the invaders. Inferno was worried about her, but there was nothing she could do. Okay, so these 3 probably did escape the other way. Right now, just believe in Kuyuki. Saying Kuyuki will be okay didn't exactly give her a sense of security. Kuyuki wasn't like her elementary school self. It's been years since they've met. They've both become magical girls, and they've somehow ended up on opposite sides. But still, she had to believe in her. Meaning, she also had to believe that Kuyuki knew nothing of Tempest. There was no choice other than that now. It was always fun to run. However, today didn't seem like a day where she had fun even once. As she ran, she was confused. As she was confused, she ran. All she could do was chase after Quake. Even if they caught them once, disruptors weren't particularly terrifying beings. They served as great practical training dummies. There was even plans to make capsules so they could carry them as portable beasts. That's what Professor Tanaka said. But she didn't remember them ever capturing disruptors that can make blades from their bodies, or ones that had 6 arms. How disruptors that they've never caught before appear in their facility? Why were the facility disruptors attacking the pure elements? Alright. They must have gotten their instructions from the briefing room. Prism Cherry wouldn't give instructions like that. Did something happen there? For example, did she get threatened by the enemy? Maybe Prism Cherry had been kidnapped too. When she thought of that possibility, she shook it off immediately. She jumped thrice to get to the rock ledge, hooking her fingers on top, then jumped from there. Quake landed with an earth-rumbling noise, then continued running. Inferno landed gently and followed her. Waiting for the bulkhead to completely raise was frustrating to them. They slid down the 30-centimeter gap of the bulkhead, entering the hallway. Just one more door before the briefing room. Just when they reached a corner, Quake suddenly stopped, causing Inferno to bump into her. Alright. What's she doing? Wondered Inferno as she looked behind her shoulder. There she saw a magical girl. She had a spade-like spear in her hands and looked like a card soldier from Alice in Wonderland. The girl was staring at them with malicious intent in her eyes. Move. Okay, so we do have multiple Shufflin here. Quake swung her hammer. The crouching down Inferno took out her sword and thrust it forward, burning a part of the girl's shoulder piece. While the girl blocked the attack, she rolled her body backwards. As she got up, she turned tail and ran. Inferno couldn't comprehend what she just witnessed. She just saw the card soldier earlier. There was no way that the card soldier could have come from the briefing room, so why'd she come from there? If she came from the briefing room, what happened to Prism Cherry? Don't think about it. When she told this to herself, she threw the crescent sword forward, aiming straight for the card soldier's back. Ah, she thought just before it pierced her target. The blood splatter dirtied the walls. The card soldier screamed like a rodent, followed by the sound of metal hitting the floor. The costume of the card soldier began to burn. By the time she reached to pull it out, the card soldier had already fallen to the floor. She stabbed it too deeply. The girl no longer moved. She killed her. Let's go, Inferno called out loud. Damn, she's okay with just killing a person. But, yeah, it seems like there's a whole deck of Shufflin, which is what I've been saying. I think the, title Jokers is in reference to the Jokers in the Shufflin deck, so I wonder if the villains are going to be the Jokers from the Shufflin deck. Let's go, Inferno called out loud, looking at Quake. Quake clasped her mouth shut, furrowing her eyebrows as she looked at Inferno. Inferno told herself that she can't think about all of that, that she can think about all of this after she does what she has to do. Yeah, that's right. Inferno's right hand seemed to be trembling as she clenched the grip of her sword tightly. If the enemy came from the briefing room, Prism Cherry might be in danger. She couldn't waste a minute, not even a second in saving her. Not even a second in not saving her. Come on. Her voice didn't tremble. This was something she had to do, and it was right there. She placed her crescent sword by a wall, massaging her cheeks with both her hands. Okay. The fallen card soldier didn't seem to have any consciousness. Just seeing the state of the girl now was about to make her break. Quake pushed the panel. The bulkhead slowly slid upwards. Okay, so she is definitely not cool with killing people then. The speed never differed when it raised or lowered, but it seemed extra slow for some reason. She gripped her crescent sword, feeling the sweat in her palms. She didn't feel like she was grabbing it properly. They had to enter as soon as possible. When they did, they saw red liquid on the floor. Were these the card soldiers? Surrounding the pool of blood were several people. Diamonds, hearts, clubs, spades. Quake and Inferno saw multiple numbers and suits among the card soldiers. They were only a little surprised. The soldiers shouted something, but they couldn't understand what they said. The queen that was on the end of the room huffed her nose and pointed in their direction. Off with their heads. Quake shouted out. Her whole body shined a brilliant yellow, glowing stronger until it became dazzling. Inferno also switched on luxury mode. Energy ran across every corner of her body. Time seemed to slow down. Other than Quake, everyone seemed to move in slow motion. With the spade leading, the card soldiers approached them in neatly ordered rows. The tip of the spade's spear glowed with dull indoor light. Getting hit by that would definitely injure her. Getting hit by the tip would be fatal. That's why she won't get hit. Quake swung her hammer at the same time Inferno jumped. Quake's powers allowed her to generate larger shockwaves than normal. It'd be hard to stand once you're caught in its short distance. In the air, however, things are different. Vibrations cause you to become unbalanced, though now Inferno was able to jump over the shaking card soldiers. Swinging her sword down to the Queen of Hearts that they were protecting before it was parried off. Numbness ran across her hands. Before she could even understand what was going on, a spade thrust her spear. A spade thrust her spear, okay. Inferno instantly half-turned her sword to parry it. It was one of the spade soldiers. Before Inferno could bring her sword down on that one, she deflected another spear. On that one, she deflected another spear was suddenly thrust from her side. Inferno was in luxury mode. Her movements and power should be powerful. No one could interrupt her. Quake swung her hammer left and right, sending card soldiers flying. The tables and chairs were all blown away as the card soldiers' bodies crashed into them. Inferno flipped in the air and landed. She saw 3 card soldiers in front of the queen. Jack of spades, queen of spades, king of spades. They dodged Quake's swing and blocked Inferno's thrust. They were able to match and respond to their attacks. Even though they were in luxury mode, those card soldiers were able to keep up. She tried to deflect the spear that they thrusted, but the orbit of the spear barely changed, as if the ones were being beaten down. As if they were the ones being beaten down, okay. The Queen of Hearts yawned, off with their heads. She slashed her sword obliquely, only to be deflected upwards. She did half a turn and struck from the right, but the spear blocked it. She reversed its rotation, attempting to hit them from the top, but they weaved and dodged. The enemy itself was far from the tip of their spears, though they're also battling with the heat generated by Inferno, so Inferno just has to get closer. If she messed this up, then Quake might get dragged in. Alright, now we see Quake and Inferno fighting against the card soldiers, protecting Grimheart. So Grimheart might be the villain, or this could still be a situation like Lady Proud where she doesn't trust them and is attacking them because of that. So I think right now we can safely guess that Grimheart is the villain, but at the same time, we can't be 100% sure yet. The 3 cards had exactly the same faces, attacking with the exact same expressions, their individual skills, physical abilities, and how they coordinated their attacks. Everything was at a high level. Quake swung her hammer, ensuring that no enemies came close to her. The enemies tried to thrust their spear at her openings, but Quake avoided it by backstepping and retreating until she had a wall behind her. Luxury mode was powerful, but it wasn't able to be used for too long. If their time limit was reached, they'd be forcefully cancelled. Afterward, there would only be 2 exhausted magical girls. Currently, the 2 of them were still somehow able to fight. If luxury mode was cancelled, their strength would be decreased massively, while they'd be facing enemies with unchanged power. They had to finish it before that. The Queen of Hearts was probably their leader. At the very least, she was the biggest enemy in this battlefield. But they can't forget about the 3 soldiers. In order for them to not approach the Queen of Hearts in the middle of the room, they thrusted their spears. Inferno began to think as they clashed their weapons. Could they possibly be trying to buy time? Did they know that luxury mode had a time limit? 3-on-2 meant that they had the advantage in numbers, and she didn't feel like they were as aggressive as they should be for someone targeting them. Okay, so also there was my theory that Grimheart could be the Professor Tanaka. So if that's the case, she might just be trying to capture the 2 of them because she does have the 3-dimensional bag. So we'll be seeing what happens. Originally, the one that should feel like they're running out of time was their opponents, but they simply weaved and dodged. Quake kicked off a fallen chair. The card soldier lowered her head in order to avoid it. Quake had her back to the entrance. Quake drew an 8 with her tail in the air. Inferno nodded. They proposed that if they weren't able to lure them out, they'll just have to go in. That was the sign that she made with her tail in the battlefield. Inferno also moved her scorpion-like tail to make an 8. Quake raised her hammer. The enemy stopped moving. Inferno was still raising her sword. While holding her sword overhead, she moved her line of sight to the monitor. She saw some card soldiers rolled over. From underneath their body, a pool of blood had formed. It wasn't the blood of the card soldiers. That blood was already here by the time Inferno and Quake arrived. Inferno's heart felt heavy. She whispered a silent apology. "I'm sorry for dragging you into all of this." They haven't decided if they should shout out their special move yet. If they were actually going to use this, they know that they shouldn't just blatantly shout it out to the enemy. Without even saying a word, Inferno and Quake swung their weapons down, striking the floor at the exact same time. Sound and light exploded. You couldn't hear anything, nor could you see anything. Ultimate Princess Explosion was a special move that the princesses could do if they combined their powers. To activate it, the princesses had to be in luxury mode and strike the ground with their weapons at the same time. Then, a polygon-shaped barrier would envelop the princesses and cause a large explosion. If all 4 of them were together, a 1-kilometer square area would be turned to ash. 3 people would result in a 100-meter square area being turned to ash, and 2 would make it 10 meters square. Since using it lightly can cause a huge disaster, they needed permission to use it during training, and it was prohibited to be used outside the base. There wasn't a good place inside the facility to cause a 100-meter or a 100-meter explosion either. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to test out a 3-person explosion. When they tried the explosion in the desert room, sand flew everywhere, and they remembered that they couldn't see anything. Even though they've used it in the wide training room, they've never imagined using it in the briefing room. She closed her eyes tightly, but still, the back of her eyelids turned white. If she opened her eyes even a little bit, the white spread out in her eyes. Black soot-like things began drifting in the air. The walls and the door were dirtied with black soot. The chairs and the tables hardened and combined with the corners of the room. Equipment that's never broken before now began to break. She heard Quake utter a small, "No way." Inferno couldn't say anything, but she thought the same thing. The card soldiers that had fallen disintegrated, and the standing ones disintegrated as well. There wasn't even a trace of their corpses. All of them turned to black soot that floated in the air. She could hear the air from the supply pipe making noises. Since the entire air around this room was combusted, they were carrying it to other places. Her head was dizzy. Just breathing hurts, and whenever she breathed out, it felt heavy. Off with their heads. The Queen of Hearts was still there. Inferno couldn't see even a trace of her being burnt. Her costume was also not the least bit dirty since before the explosion. She just looked bored. Quake retreated. Inferno gritted her teeth, but there was nothing more they could do but stand. They couldn't go forward. She couldn't swing her sword. They had to desperately retreat. Off with their heads. The Queen's hands reached deep into her bag. She grabbed the nape of a magical girl's neck from the bag. The body was also still attached to the neck. Head, shoulders, arms, torso. It shouldn't fit in a bag that size. A single magical girl was pulled out. Ace of Spades. Just seeing her figure, Inferno was convinced she was going to die. The Jack, King, and Queen were all stupidly powerful. This girl was supposedly different compared to them. Even though she looked completely the same, she felt completely different. Inferno will die here. She'll kill her. She could understand that pain even though she didn't move. She still wasn't out of luxury mode, but she couldn't see any vision of victory. Just having that card soldier looking at her gave her goosebumps. Her knees were trembling. Sorry, let me get some water. Her waist was likely to collapse. They couldn't use Ultimate Princess Explosion, and the Queen of Hearts was still there. There was no way for them to win. Whoosh, her body was flung, pulled behind her. Quake, who was behind her, had grabbed her collar and thrown her out of the room. When she noticed that, she stood up in the hallway. Now Inferno knew why Quake had decided to retreat behind. She was trying to open the bulkhead. That same bulkhead was now closing in front of Inferno's eyes. While facing the enemy, Quake spoke to Inferno without looking at her. "Run. Go meet with Deluge." And I called this that Quake would sacrifice herself for the other pure elements. "Run. Go meet with Deluge." She couldn't say the words, "What are you saying?" Her extended hand stopped halfway from the panel when she wanted to open the bulkhead again. Quake was trembling. Her hammer, shoulders, legs, all of them were trembling. "I'm gonna try doing something heroic." The door didn't stop. Quake's figure had disappeared. "I love you all. I've decided to live so I could protect you all. So this really isn't all that weird." The door closed. Inferno's sword disappeared. She turned away from the bulkhead and ran. Luxury mode is turned off. The powerful feeling that coursed through her body was now gone. The feeling of exhaustion and fatigue began to spread from the back of her body. Yet she kept running, never stopping. She kept running so much that she forgot to wipe the tears flowing down her cheeks. Okay, so I wonder who she's going to run into now. So now we're jumping to Filaroo at page 22. Lady Proud and Shufflin were killed by demons. Filuru was fighting the demons alone on the trees, but she could still hear their screams, and the demons' roars of joy and bone-crunching biting noises. She believed Snow White, Utakata, and Styler Mimi when they told her of their deaths. Filuru had always pushed her feelings of loss as a magical girl, but now she can do so no longer. She's always thought that there might be deaths involved. When she received the text, went searching for the man-made magical girls, somehow found their laboratory, finding other magical girls underground with almost no preparation at all. Yet an ally had just been killed. Even if she didn't see it, she still couldn't stand that firmly. The last time the two of them talked, Lady Proud, who acted as a leader, and the Shufflin that constantly kept trembling, both of them chomped by demons. She couldn't see them anymore. She couldn't talk to them. Since she was a magical girl, she was able to handle this with stable emotions. If she weren't a magical girl, she may have taken the death by running in fear or crying. The other magical girls at first seemed calm as well, but the air was definitely heavy, especially Princess Deluge, the trident-wielding magical girl who was all alone, separated from her friends. She wasn't foolish for her kindness in trying to save Shufflin, but she was just sitting alone in the corner. Feeling that she's lost her way, Filuru understood exactly how that felt. They were alike that way. They decided to go back to base, only to find out their base was gone. It was just a nightmare of a bad joke. When they returned to the entrance of the forest room, Grim had disappeared. Not even the sofa, nor the desk, nor candle stand were there, as if it was never there to begin with. Grim Heart and all of her belongings were gone. Worrying about Shufflin's death was no longer the problem. We now have Kafuria, Umbrain, and one more magical girl that's missing. This last one was oozing with confidence, but they shouldn't have left her alone. Snow White began talking to Fall about something. Stunt Chica was playing pantomime in the front of Deluge, who wasn't interested in the act. Marika Fuguroi was the only one separated from the others. Right now the Rafflesia on her head had withered, but there was still a hint of a stench. Getting close to her made Filuru feel nauseous. Looking at the stench made her eyes tear up, even though she appreciated that this very scent was what eliminated the demons. She still didn't want to get near her. Stellar Mimi was messing with the entrance. It seems we've run into some trouble, haven't we? Utakata sounded like she was saying things casually rather than as a fact. Somehow that made Filuru feel less comfortable. Okay, so she wasn't mentioned in the last scene, but Utakata did make it out with them. Yeah. Grimheart's another one that's gone missing. But isn't that a good thing? No, what? That's not a good thing. That's never a good thing. Still, Utakata looked at the deep end of the hallway. There, Snow White and Fall were talking. Using her threads, she could hear what they were saying, but she didn't plan to eavesdrop on someone who can read their minds. Exactly. That's what I was thinking too. I was like, you can't eavesdrop on Snow White. She would know it. Snow White was the only one who judged Grim Heart to be left alone. Then she failed. Or maybe she didn't. Of course she did. What are you talking about? Snow White. She doesn't look like she wanted to work together with Grim Heart. Seems like she doesn't trust her. She doesn't trust her. So Snow White, who can read minds, didn't trust Grim Heart. If she really was thinking of something bad, she should have said that on the spot, she should have said on the spot that she's thinking something bad to everyone. Even if she won't be a problem if she wasn't with them, won't she be a problem just due to her personality? Bad personalities tend to cause trouble no matter where they're placed. Shit, Styler Mimi struck the door. The password to the door's changed. What? But we didn't have to do that when we came in. Like I said, trouble. How awesome is that? Looks like we're stuck here. Marika was the only one who was having fun. Even though they'd just met, Filuru wondered why she was laughing when her allies had been killed earlier. Even though the flower on her head was withered, she was still very much energetic. Wouldn't it be better if someone scolded her? So many people she met at once. Was it weird to call them all allies? Back when she was just a group of 3. Okay? She was worried about combining their talents, but now you've got Grim Heart, Shufflin, Lady Proud, Umbrain, Stunt Chica, Snow White, Marika Fuguroi, and Styler Mimi. Well, safety in numbers, that won't change so long as everyone's active. She tried to comfort herself with those thoughts. She couldn't say that to Marika, though, but she wished that she could give her a piece of her mind. If no one else would, then Filuru should, right? Marika Fukuroi was a fearsome fighter. They were all trapped here, but since she was so confident in her strength, she didn't even get bothered. That was probably Filuru's role. While she was confused about the whole thing, she felt her pinky vibrate. Bulkhead, it's opening. Left side, desert. The ones who were sitting quickly stood up. The ones who stood up wielded their weapons and ran. While howling like a beast, Marika Fukuroi led on. Okay. Alright. The other magical girls lining up in the aisle. Now the distance between them and the bulkhead was approximately 15 meters. The one they saw on the other side of the bulkhead was someone familiar. Huh? She's alive. Shufflin. She wasn't wearing hearts like the time she was killed. It was the spade suit they saw in the desert, and her number was somehow 7. Shufflin survived. Filuru was filled with joy at how she somehow found a way to escape. Filuru was stunned as she saw the others. Behind the 7 of spades Shufflin were other Shufflins. There were multiple Shufflins. They're enemies. They're going to fight. Snow White shouted out at the same time. The Shufflins took out their spade-shaped spears, beginning to thrust forward. They became enemies in the blink of an eye. Marika Fukuroi was able to block the spears, but her shoulder was struck by a mace. Then Stunt Chica, who was trying to help, was swallowed up by a herd of Shufflin. Snow White and Princess Deluge tried to drive back the Shufflins with their pole arms, but the Shufflins pushed back. Hurting 1 or 2 of them didn't seem to faze them. Filuru... It seems like there shouldn't be that many spade Shufflin left. Didn't seem to faze them. Filuru stuck the heads of the Shufflin toward the ceiling. Utakata moved at the same time. While jumping over the heads of the Shufflins, she blew bubbles, getting inside a giant bubble that enveloped herself. Faster than the Shufflins could realize they're being pulled toward the ceiling, Filuru crawled across the very same ceiling like a spider. She was knitting even more threads there. It was a piece of cake to crawl across the ceiling covered in threads. She went overhead of all the Shufflins, and Utakata was moving in parallel. The 2 of them nodded as they both saw each other. When they managed to cut off the herd of Shufflin, they jumped back and returned. Again, as Spider-Man and Doflamingo have proven, string powers are OP. They heard the bizarre voice of Marika Fukuroi from the middle of the cut-off Shufflin. She had a Shufflin's ankle in one hand, another Shufflin's ankle in another hand, swinging them around, hitting both the walls, the floor, and the other Shufflin. Snow White slashed a Shufflin's arm. Princess Deluge blocked the Shufflin spear and froze her hands. Stellar Mimi intercepted the remaining Shufflin with her scissors. Filuru kicked off the Shufflin. Utakata blew her bubbles. There were so many of them, stronger than the Heart Shufflin, yet each one of them wasn't strong on their own. One by one they kept pulling in enemies while they were retreating behind. Opening the bulkhead, Utakata quickly flung herself toward the desert. Then, all at once, the Shufflins tripped. Before they exited the room, Filuru had knitted threads across the floor. It was an invisible trap. She kicked the fallen Shufflin and trampled on them. Filuru repeated to herself the rule of not forgiving raiders or escaped prisoners, and all of her hesitation vanished. The duty of a prison guard is to operate the prison and not let it stagnate, not to embrace the prisoners. Now, fully intending to break their bones, she placed enough weight when she stepped on the Shufflins to do so. Marika Fukuroi was sprayed in feelings of rage in battle. She had no forgiveness in her heart for the Shufflins who were allies just before she stomped on their heads, robbing them of their fighting abilities. Utakata was doing the same beside her while blowing bubbles into the hallway. A great melee, however. She's begun to see a trend. While the Shufflins were attacking without a care for their lives, their difference in ability was clear. Choosing to reveal themselves in a cramped hallway was the enemy's mistake. If they had they fought in a wide open space, Filuru's group may have been surrounded. A small choke point like a hallway was something that they could use to stop them. Filuru sewed through the fallen Shufflin's legs with the floor. She did the same with the Shufflins on the walls. She'd kicked them toward the wall and moved in one swift motion, being able to do so because the Shufflin were weakened. While the sounds of the thrashing echoed, there was a loud noise right behind her. Filuru saw Utakata. Utakata's usual smiling face had disappeared. What Filuru saw was the unbelievable sight of a spear penetrating Utakata's throat. The spear wasn't being held by a Shufflin's hand. It was coming out of the bag that Utakata's been carrying on her waist. The spear protruded, and blood was overflowing from Utakata's throat. Following from the spear, a hand, a head, and shoulders. Then a new Shufflin appeared completely from inside the bag, knocking down Utakata, who had blood flowing from her mouth. The bag that Grimheart had. It had her canopy and her throne, her bookshelf and her desk, and other large objects in them. Even Shufflin's were in there. The Shufflin's head was ruthlessly calculative as she beat down Utakata. There was no way for Utakata to defend herself. Filaru had practiced her cooperation with Utakata, and now the Shufflins have prevented it. This was beyond a simple pincer attack. Now she had to leave dealing with groups to others. Filaru avoided the enemy's attacks, dodged them, then reattached herself to the ceiling again. Okay, again, really cool fights this arc. Seems like Utakata's gone too. We're killing off a lot of characters this chapter. One thing I will say though is that whenever I do another version of my favorite characters video, I feel like there's going to be a lot of Joker's characters because I love so many of these characters this arc. None of the deaths of... I mentioned this, I think it was on Discord when I was talking, where in past arcs, deaths were like really big, important emotional moments, where it feels like last arc, and then again this arc, they've been more just like fighting combat deaths, and they haven't had big, emotional, important moments. Like, we didn't know anything about Utakata's past. It was just kind of a fight. The death wasn't a big, important thing. So, yeah. Just bringing that up, that it's kind of different from past arcs. We haven't really developed the characters in the same ways. And I kind of prefer the previous way of doing things, even though I really, really enjoy this arc. Let me get some water before going through what's probably going to be the last section for this video. So, we have Grimheart now. Grimheart kicked off a chair. There were a total of 6 chairs built into this briefing room, although her own self had remained unaffected by the explosion. Now she couldn't sit comfortably anywhere. It's interesting, this is the first time we're seeing from her perspective. There was no reason to use things that barbarians used anyways. She took out her favorite throne and placed it in the center of the room. Beside her, there was only the Ace of Spades. The Shufflin that were stuffing this room before were now burnt in bunches. They've only completed one objective. That objective wasn't perfectly completed yet. Securing the experimental bodies, and now they've achieved this objective. They've secured the Earth body and the Wind body. Okay then, the Wind body was attacked by the clubs hidden in the desert room. The clubs were stealth expert, whereas the spades possessed high combat abilities. By using the 4D bag, the club's unit was able to be hidden in the desert. No magical girl able to attack or counterattack them. They secured one experimental body. They also secured the magical girl fighting her, Kafuria. She'll be used for other things. The Earth body was captured by the Ace of Spades. The Earth body fully played out her role as a sacrifice to allow the Fire body to escape. Grimheart was almost frustrated. Okay, so she says she secured them, so maybe she hasn't killed them, but rather just detained them. She secured the magical girl Umbrain for further replenishment. Alright. While looking at the surrounding hearts Shufflin, Grim pulled out the Ace of Spades and the Ace of Clubs. No magical girl could fend off a combined attack by the best combatant and the best stealth expert. She had what she needed to replenish. Capturing one experimental body was good. Capturing 2 was satisfactory. There should be enough data to compare. Not even scholars would complain. Alright. The biggest problem is that there were so many people who now knew of this man-made magical girl raising project. Alright. So, she's hiding it then. Grimheart had already decided not to allow that project to exist from the beginning. The vassals that she had ruled from the land of magic decided to create magical girls by their own hands. Far too extreme. Children who open doors that shouldn't be opened should be punished. Even knowing of the existence was a sin. Okay, so her vassals created the man-made magical girl project. So whoever Professor Tanaka is, there's someone who works for Grimheart who went rogue pretty much. Already, one person has escaped, but there was nothing Grimheart could do about that. If there were only a few people that knew, she could silence them easily. Besides, the one who escaped has been majorly wounded. She's not a problem. In order to strike them down at once, she had to humiliate herself by pretending to cooperate with them. Finally, she had succeeded in confining them. Now, they're easy prey for the Shufflins. Grimheart simply had to wait. Grimheart looked at the ace of spades. She was also just looking forward without a single hint of emotion. A boring magical girl, however, a skillful one as well. If she was able to take the technology of these man-made magical girls, she'd be able to create even more capable servants. The people in this world were barbarians, but they do manage to produce some interesting technology thanks to the difference of their culture and ideas. The ability to temporarily enhance yourself, combining powers to cause explosions, among other things. Alright. Simply looking at the range of what they could do piqued her interest. She wanted that technology to power Shufflin as well. Such technology should only be used to create man-made magical girls out of homunculi as well. Alright. However, her troops weren't enough. All of the Shufflin that were proficient in intelligence, the diamonds, were all eradicated. They were the ones able to crack and change the password at the entrance. Grimheart couldn't do it on her own. Besides, it's strange for Grimheart to even have to lay a finger on anything. Grimheart was the type to sit around and let her servants do all her work. To even have to so much as act against barbarians to her was shameful. Shameful. She may as well die. To Grimheart, an incarnation of the Shenox Valmer, one of the mages so-called 3 sages of the land of magic. Okay, so Grimheart's actually one of the 3 sages then. There was no obligation of labor. Her very existence was already significant. Okay, so if she's one of the 3 sages then, that means she's more a mage than an actual magical girl, which makes sense because we already knew that she was from the land of magic, and if she was a magical girl, that would mean she would have been human. So yeah, it makes more sense that she's a mage then. Grimheart, or rather more than a mage, kind of like nobility within the land of magic. Grimheart placed her hand inside the bag, taking out the 2 experimental bodies and 2 magical girls, the wind body, the earth body, Kafiria and Umbrain, all of them tied up with magical ropes, unable to move. It also seals the usage of powers. Okay, so she did leave them all alive. Kafiria cried out for something, but Grimheart could only hear a key. Judging on her feelings, she probably felt a little helpless now. Okay, so is this something interesting where, because of her being some sort of higher up or something, not only can they not really understand her, but she can't really understand what they're saying either. Judging on her feelings, she probably felt a little helpless now. She didn't need to understand her. She'll just silence her by being the first sacrifice. She once again pulled something out of the bag, another Shufflin. Off with her head. She didn't care who. The Shufflin raised her huge scythe and swung down. Okay, so this is it. Joker was an excellent servant. She'd never betray her master's trust. Kafiria was noisy. Grimheart wanted to silence her, and thus Joker acted out her will. If a sacrifice was necessary, she'd slaughter the most uncomfortable person to be around. Kafiria's head flew off, her life force being drained toward Joker and poured to all the Shufflins. Whether it was the extinguished Shufflin or the cut-down Shufflin, they all received it as well. All the fallen Shufflin have now returned back to Joker, creating a new deck. By dedicating only 1 magical girl, 52 magical girls can be replenished once more. Okay, so that makes sense how the spades have come back multiple times. They restock the deck every time they kill a person. Alright. But that is just the coolest power. Shufflin's probably my favorite character in the series. Okay, the spades were excellent at fighting, the diamonds were good with technology and possessed excellent intelligence, clovers were stealth experts, and hearts were absurdly durable, so they were often used for venting out stress. As long as Joker was alive, she can supplement everything with just a magical girl's life. The other 2 experimental bodies and Umbrain were making noises. Their looks of fear were quite entertaining. Diamonds, find out how this facility works. Spades, go after the remaining magical girls. While listening to Joker give out instructions, Grimheart nodded, satisfied. Okay, so Joker can actually talk, and Joker's the one that's ordering them around. Okay, and Joker can use just normal speech. Okay, Very, very interesting. I loved this part of the read through. This chapter is so good. This arc is so good. Like I said, I'd like it more if the deaths were more impactful. We didn't know anything about Utakata or Kafuria. We didn't really know anything about... well, we kind of knew Prism Cherry, but we didn't know much about Lady Proud. So I don't know. It is what it is. But that makes me think that Umbrain is a sacrifice, so next time they feel like they're about to take out... Shufflin, she's probably going to restack the deck by killing Umbrain. So I wonder, Joker must be the one who has to kill a person to restack. And so they restacked the deck both by killing Prism Cherry and then again by killing Kafuria. So I wonder if it's Joker that has to kill him, or if the deck is restocked when Utakata gets killed by the spade or not. So I guess we'll see. Also interesting that Grimheart's not taking the pure elements dead right now. She's taking them alive. So we'll have to see where that goes. But either way, I'm really, really interested. This arc would be so good animated. Some of the fights would be really cool and interesting. But either way, that's it. I'm going to end this here. Like if you did like the video, comment down there to tell me what you thought of this week's read through, this part of the chapter, what you thought of my thoughts on it. Subscribe for more Magical Girl Raising Project, much more on the channel. Follow on Twitter if you want. I can try to keep you updated on stuff for the channel. I'll talk to you there. And if you want a link to our Discord server to talk to me or more of us on Discord about this or anything else, then just ask and I can give you a link. That's it. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.